All right, so throughout the entirety of the negotiations surrounding both the bipartisan infrastructure framework and the Build Back Better agenda, we have seen Biden's agenda get completely watered down and eviscerated by a handful of corporate ghouls within his own party, basically with no pushback, at least not public pushback, from Joe Biden himself. And so we have kind of been jokingly asking the question, who is in power here, right? Do we have a President Joe Biden or do we have a President Joe Manchin? And there's this radio host named Charlamagne the God who got Kamala Harris, of all people, in front of him, and during this interview asked her this question, right? Asked who is really in power right now throughout the Joe Biden administration. And so she got absolutely flustered and basically freaked out and got super defensive in response to this question. And I think it's pretty revealing in terms of how the Joe Biden administration is viewing themselves. So let's go ahead and watch this clip. It's a little bit hard to hear some of it, but they have captions down here below, and I'll kind of recap it after we watch. So let's go ahead and get into this.
Who's the superhero that's going to speak against Joe Manchin? I want to know who's the real president of this country. Is it Joe Biden or Joe Manchin?
I'm sorry, I interrupted. I'll tell you what I said. It's Simone. I'm so sorry, Charlamagne. We have to
She can hear me.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me, Madam Vice President?
I'm sorry, we got it right.
Uh-oh.
So I'm sorry to interrupt.
They're acting like they can't hear me.
I can hear you.
So who's the real president of this country? Is it Joe Manchin or Joe Biden, Madam Vice President?
Come on, Charlamagne. It's Joe Biden.
I can't tell.
No. It's Joe Biden. And don't start talking like a Republican about asking whether or not he's president.
Do you think Joe Manchin is a problem?
It's Joe Biden, and I'm vice president, and my name is Kamala Harris. And
all right, so you see how flustered she got there at the end, and the person who was kind of like interjecting at the beginning of that interview when he starts to ask this question, that was her top aide, Simone Sanders, okay? And she was definitely 100% trying to bail out Kamala Harris in response to that question being asked, and it obviously didn't go that well. Charlamagne immediately saw through the bullshit and called them out basically and was like, look, they're trying to pretend like they can't hear me right now when we know goddamn well that it was just that Simone Sanders didn't want Kamala Harris to have to address this question. Why? Well, basically for the same reason that Charlamagne the God asked this question in the first place, okay? Kamala Harris did not want to give an actual answer to this question because the answer is exactly what Charlamagne was just suggesting. It is that Joe Manchin has basically been stomping all over Biden and his agenda throughout this entire administration. So yeah, it's a totally fair question. It's not a Republican talking point as Kamala Harris was just trying to make it seem, and she didn't even have a good answer, right? She didn't even address the real question at hand. She just said, you're using Republican talking points. This is completely unfair. Like, my name is Kamala Harris and I'm the vice president. Joe Biden is the real president. Well, it's not just a question of like who is technically in power within this party. It's, are you using the power at your disposal to effectively get your agenda passed? And the answer to that is absolutely goddamn not. Not only has Kamala Harris not been going out and really trying to push back on whether it's Kirsten Sinema or Joe Manchin or Josh Gottheimer, not only has she not been going out and making these public statements, but neither has Biden, okay? They have effectively been doing these behind closed door negotiations where they let Manchin get whatever the fuck he wants out of them. So, you know, it's a totally fair question to ask. And the fact that Kamala Harris gets so defensive on this kind of shows you that she is recognizing the current situation and is kind of scared a little bit, I guess, that people realize how much bullshit in terms of excuses that they've been trying to throw out there for why they can't get all of Biden's promises passed, okay? It is because they're basically allowing Joe Manchin to act like a king or to act like he's the president, okay? Joe Manchin or Joe Biden should be going out there and absolutely metaphorically, I guess, beating the shit out of Joe Manchin to get him to fall in line, okay? But we haven't seen even the tiniest modicum of a fight out of Joe Biden throughout this entire process. And how do I know this? Well, first of all, one of the things that Joe Biden keeps repeating throughout this entire negotiation process is that, well, Joe Manchin, he's just, you know, he's from West Virginia, right? So he's a conservative. He has to represent his conservative constituency. And therefore, you know, what can we do about it? If he doesn't like a certain policy, then he's just representing his voters and nothing can really be done about it, right? Can't call him out for corruption or anything like that. Well, you go and look at all the individual policies that Joe Manchin has been opposing throughout this, and the data shows that even his so-called conservative West Virginia constituency, even they support all of the major provisions that were in the $3.5 trillion bill. So let's just go ahead and recap here. We got some polling data. A majority of West Virginia voters support the provisions of the Build Back Better plan. Which version of it? Well, the $3.5 trillion version of it that got completely eviscerated and had a lot of these policies completely taken out. So let's just go start with one here. So you have the paid family and medical leave, okay? This specific policy, paid family leave, which is, by the way, something that basically the entirety of the rest of the world has guaranteed for their citizens. The United States does not have any version of it whatsoever right now. They started at like 12 weeks, then they whittled it down to 4 weeks, and now because of Joe Manchin, it's down to no weeks, okay? So you see here from Business Insider, Joe Manchin is throwing cold water on paid leave again, threatening to leave the U.S. as the world's only developed economy without mandated time off for workers. So this was Joe Manchin who opposed paid family leave. Well, let's just check in with the West Virginia voting constituency that he is always talking about as if he represents them. Well, they happen to think by a margin of 69 to 23, okay, a plus 46% margin, they support paid family leave. So again, just one example here, we're going to get to more policies, but just one example where at face value, West Virginia voters overwhelmingly support it, plus 46. That is not even remotely close, okay? So he's opposing it. Why? Not because he's representing his conservative constituency, but because he is representing his corporate donors. It is that simple. Now, we could take a different policy. Manchin shutting down Sanders on Medicare expansion. So part of the policy that was within the $3.5 trillion bill was to expand Medicare to cover dental, vision, and hearing. Now, basically what's left in the current form that Joe Manchin still opposes is just the hearing portion, but West Virginia voters, yet again, overwhelmingly supported all three of those being expanded to be included in Medicare as part of that coverage. So you see here, expand Medicare coverage. Again, this is an even wider margin. It is a plus 70, okay? It is 82% support to 12% oppose. Again, this is not even close. This goes up across bipartisan lines. This applies to a majority of Republicans, a majority of independents, a vast majority of Democrats, and Joe Manchin opposes this yet again for his corporate donors, not because he has some sort of a conservative constituency that he's trying to represent. You see it here in the data. It's not even close, okay? And again, this is something that's like very rudimentary. This is something that in basically every other OECD nation, they have coverage, not only some version of a single payer healthcare system where every single citizen is guaranteed healthcare as a human right, but on top of that, we're talking about expanding a public healthcare insurance system to cover what? Hearing, your ears, your teeth in your mouth, and your eyes, dental, vision, and hearing. Are these not part of your body? Are these not part of your health? I mean, it's a joke at face value to suggest that dental, vision, and hearing somehow should not be included as part of healthcare. It's like, what the fuck do you classify as healthcare? It's just completely ridiculous. But again, a 70-point margin in favor of that policy that Joe Manchin got taken out of the bill. Now, Joe Manchin's objections to clean energy program threatened Biden's climate promises. So he got basically all of the actual programs that had teeth to them in terms of tackling climate change that were in Build Back Better. He got all of those taken out and replaced with like some, tacit, mild tax incentives or whatever the fuck to basically get on your hands and knees and beg these fossil fuel companies to start doing the right thing. But you see here, he's opposed to the clean energy program. Now, yet again, you would think that based on what Joe Manchin says, based on what Joe Biden says, that, he just represents, conservative West Virginia coal miners, and so therefore he has to, stick by the fossil fuel industry. Well, no, that is not the case at all. Even clean energy investments, of all things, still have 60% support, 32% oppose for a plus 28 margin. Again, not even remotely close, even on things like clean energy, okay? This is a perfect example because this is exactly the type of policy that Democrats would throw their hands up and say, well, he's from West Virginia, right? He has that coal miner constituency, right? So he has to defend that. He has to defend the fossil fuel industry. No, he doesn't, okay? Even voters that are supposedly these conservative voters in West Virginia, even they recognize that clean energy, renewable energy is going to be the future of the economy. They don't want to get left behind, okay? They understand that the coal industry and a lot of these other fossil fuel industries, they are a dying industry, whether or not we like it or whether or not, you care about those people individually, right? If you actually cared about them, you would support transitioning as quickly and efficiently as possible towards renewable energy so that the jobs in the energy sector, whether it's, fossil fuels or renewables, so that they'll have something sustainable for the future, okay? Joe Manchin doesn't give a shit about West Virginia coal miners, okay? He just cares about his own bottom line. I've covered this story multiple times, but Joe Manchin makes literally hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars per year from coal companies, okay, that he has an ownership stake in, right? You see here, I'll link this down in the description below if you want to read the entirety of it, but reporting from The Intercept, Joe Manchin's dirty empire. The West Virginia senator reaps big financial rewards from a network of coal companies with grim records of pollution, safety violations, and death. Okay, so listen, this is why he opposes the clean energy programs, right? It's not because he's, supporting those West Virginia coal miners. It's the exact opposite. He's just working on behalf of himself and against the interests regardless of the overwhelming majority of his constituency who did support the clean energy programs. And just one more example, okay, because it's not just on the policies that were within the $3.5 trillion bill, it's also how they were paying for this, or paying for this under their, neoliberal worldview, basically. But you see here, a majority of West Virginia voters support how the Build Back Better plan is paid for. And you see here, okay, limit deductions for wealthy business owners, higher income taxes for the wealthy, increased capital gains tax, IRS enforcement, increased corporate tax rate. So, that kind of sounds a little bit more in line with somebody who Joe Manchin would call like a radical socialist in Bernie Sanders. And you see here, again, the margins are not even close. Plus 37, plus 46, plus 48, plus 52, plus 57, etc. Now, Joe Manchin opposes these things, okay? On the billionaires tax, Joe Manchin says he doesn't like targeting different people, and that the ultra wealthy have contributed to society, created a lot of jobs. Okay, so this is just something that like Mitch McConnell would say. All right, he's not even pretending to represent even his conservative constituency. He's just representing the billionaire class. This is something you would hear straight out of the mouth of a whiny billionaire on CNBC or on Fox News or something, complaining about Bernie wanting to tax the rich. Okay, the overwhelming majority of average working class West Virginia voters, they want to tax the rich. They hate the elite. And yet Joe Manchin turns around and does the exact opposite of that. He is repping the billionaire class. Okay, and again, this was a billionaire tax that would have literally only applied to like 600, 700 Americans. So how the fuck do you even pretend like you care about anything other than the billionaire class while you reject a tax that would only apply to like 700 American billionaires? Okay, it's just, again, completely ridiculous to suggest that he's representing some conservative constituency. He's not. He's representing a tiny minority of billionaires within this country. But again, just to give you a perspective in terms of where we are at right now and why somebody might ask this question of Kamala Harris for why Joe Manchin doesn't maybe seem like he is the president and that Joe Manchin seems to be wielding a more significant degree of power. Well, this is the latest that we have on the Build Back Better agenda. Keep in mind, this was the Build Back Better agenda. Okay, this is what Biden structured his entire campaign around, was Build Back Better. Okay, this is his flagship policy proposal. What's the latest on it? Well, we have Joe Manchin literally laughing and spitting in Joe Biden's face. Okay, so this is from a couple days ago. Manchin just told a small group of us that he spoke to Biden today. Not much else on timeline. Manu Raju asked him if Biden is moving closer to what he's asking for. Manchin laughed and said, "I wouldn't say that." So again, this is why people would ask a question like that. Okay, it's because Biden is perpetually cucked by corporate Democrats. Why? Because he himself is a corporate Democrat, and he really doesn't give a shit, in all honesty, if Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema take specific provisions out of the bills, because he never really believed in them, okay? They were campaign slogans that he was running on to pretend and to garner votes for himself to beat Donald Trump, okay? That's the reality of this, all right? He doesn't actually believe in his own agenda because he's not going out and fighting for his own agenda. That's what you would do if you actually believed in something, okay? But he's not doing that. So it's totally fair for Charlemagne the God to ask this type of question of Kamala Harris, and you see how flustered she gets. She understands that there's at least a nugget of truth in the back of her mind, okay? She understands that Joe Biden is making himself basically look like a complete bitch in this entire situation, and that it's also making Kamala Harris look weak herself, right? What have we seen Kamala Harris do throughout the entirety of the Joe Biden administration so far? She came out and told, struggling immigrants who are trying to come here in search of a better life, she told them, don't come. She said, go home, right? I mean, what else have we seen, right? She's not doing anything substantive, and she knows it, and she also knows that her approval rating has been massively taking a nosedive along with Joe Biden recently, so they see the writing on the walls, and it's no surprise why she would be flustered at a totally reasonable question like this.